Hello, if you're watching on YouTube. Today I am with another special guest. He is the writer and director of Spider-Man Every Hour, Jeremy Cascamisi. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. I haven't really gotten a head start on my day yet. But you got me out of bed earlier than normal. It's a good thing. So thank you. I got some stuff to do today, but it's actually beautiful here. I know you have some upset weather over there, but
Yeah.
very nice. I think it's almost 60 degrees today, which is very nice.
Oh, that's good. Your weather situation is much better over there. Yeah, so we're here to talk to you and about the movie. And I don't know if you've seen the interview I did with Gavin at all, but um,
Maybe bits and pieces if he shared it on his story, but I have not watched the full thing.
okay, right, cool. So this is just like I've been doing a profiling of sorts on like different filmmakers, especially considering that I'm very much into Spider-Man. So being able to talk to fellow creatives about the
Yeah,
work that they're doing in the community is great. So yeah, thanks for agreeing to be here.
of course. Thank you so much for inviting me.
No worries. So let's probably get on with the questions before I keep waffling. So you're part of the comic book community and you're also into cosplaying, as I understand.
Here and there, yeah.
Yeah. So, and now you're producing your own adaptation of Spider-Man. So if we go back, what would you say was the beginning of this interest?
The interests of Spider-Man or the account and all that stuff.
Just everything, like what got you into the comic books and I guess Spider-Man specifically?
Um, this, I think I was just suddenly he was in my life. I don't really have like a specific moment. I don't think. I just remember at some point I was obsessed with the red and blue. um So I remember I had Spider-Man sheets and Spider-Man pillowcases from Spider-Man 1. So it was obviously, I think, around 2002, which I would have been 4, turning 5 around then. I think that's about when it sort of happened. I think that first Spider-Man movie was just suddenly in my life.
Mhm.
So I think that, kickstarted it. But then he was always with me growing up. I remember um, it was a book fair. I don't know if like everybody like has those or whatnot, but it's like when you're in school and the school brings in like new books and you bring in a few dollars and your class is invited to the library or wherever this book fair is set up and you get to buy things, like books or pencils or cool pens and like stuff for like classes and stuff like that. And that was when I bought my first comic book. Like I went to the book fair and all the other kids were, I don't know what they were like, Harry Potter or whatnot, like getting actual books. And I remember coming back to my classroom with like a comic book, like a Spider-Man comic book. And they're like, "You got a comic book?" And I was like, "Yeah." um, that was like, and I still have it. It's in my drawer back there. It's being held up by tape. But so yeah, that was fifth grade, and then the character just kind of stuck with me throughout high school. He was a very important um, presence in my life. The Andrew Garfield movies were coming out as soon as I was like starting high school, and then the second one came out, I think, my sophomore year of high school. So he was just a very prominent character throughout my life. And as soon as I graduated, I knew I wanted a costume. Like that's like I wanted to do things that I saw other people online doing. So yeah, so it's been a fun journey. And I'm very appreciative of the character and all of his creators.
Yeah, I've noticed how much of a huge impact the character has on a lot of people. So I can
Right.
definitely empathize with that aspect, as did Gavin. So
Yeah.
being him being part of someone's life from an early age. Like I can see that it's not just a one-off type of interest that you just have in your spare time. There's a deeper attachment to the character, and I think that just proves that despite fiction being what it is, it still can have such a massive impact on people's lives.
Mm-hmm. And I think the thing about Spider-Man is that he grew with me. There's versions that I'm like, that isn't for me anymore. I think there's like an animated show with Ghost Spider and Miles Morales Spider-Man, and they're like little cartoon figures, but it's on like a Disney show. There's versions of the character that is not for, it's not my, like, I'm not the target audience, but there's also versions that have grown with me and like have helped me. Like Spider-Man 2 is my favorite Spider-Man movie, just because like the more I grow up, I'm like that's the most relatable one. It's insane. But yeah, so I'm just very appreciative that he's a character that like you don't leave behind. Like I had other favorite characters like Lightning McQueen or Elmo, and they don't grow up with you, but Spider-Man sort of like sticks around through everything. So
Yeah, I suppose since for our generation as well, because we got the animated series,
yeah,
the first live action films, so it's literally been a part of each stage.
gosh.
So moving on to Every Hour then. So could you tell me, well, rather, what sort of the gist of the story and themes that you've written up for the movie?
It's funny, I was sending a version of the script to a few people yesterday because I'm still writing and getting feedback and like what works for the additional scenes that we still have to shoot, to wrap this thing up. So it's nice getting other people's opinions on it and seeing reactions already just from like, the words on a screen. So that's been cool. Yeah, so the gist of the story is basically just small lessons that I think Peter learns throughout his life. The way I pitch it to people is like, if you go to the comic book store and pick up a Spider-Man comic, one issue, that's the story you get. There's a to be continued at the end, but what if you don't go back to the comic book store and pick it up? Like, this is the only thing you have for the character. So that's what Every Hour is. Like, the ending is left, it's not open for a sequel, but it's like it's left open because it's a character that he'll live on, he'll do other things, just like the movies. Like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man is still swinging out there in a universe. Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is still swinging around out there in a universe. So it's basically just like if you go to the comic book store, pick up one comic, and that's the story you read, and that's the story you get. So it's more of a short film than like a full-length thing, and there's no plans for like a sequel. I think I'm just very happy with a contained story, but it's basically about Peter trying to juggle the responsibility of being Spider-Man and his responsibility to the people in Peter Parker's life who don't know he's Spider-Man, and in specific, Gwen Stacy. So yeah, it's about them having, to go on this date, and Peter is trying to make it to this date, and he's deciding whether or not to like let whatever is happening in the city happen and go meet with Gwen, or is he going to stand Gwen up and go, stop this thing? So that's what the story is. And then, both Gwen and Peter have like a moment of realization in the film of what this relationship is, what it means. Is it good? Is it toxic? Is it working? Type of thing. So yeah, it's a very personal story for me because I like to weave in my own personal experiences with like past relationships or current relationships. That's the stuff I have to draw on. So in a way, it's like me, even though I'm not like, I have a worse excuse when I'm not a good person to other people, because I'm not Spider-Man. Like I'm not out there like saving the world while ignoring your calls or not meeting. I'm just, letting you down. So, that's a personal thing for me, but I think it's something we all struggle with, is like commitments, and communication is some of my biggest struggles. But I think like seeing that in Spider-Man as somebody who has like commitment and communication issues, but also still manages to like, pick himself back up, is such a you know, valuable lesson to learn for everybody. So I think that's what the lesson in here is, no matter what happens, like your choices do define you. And sometimes you make what you think is the right choice and it ends up being the wrong choice. Or I think it's a little bit more blurred than that, where it's like there was no right choice. Like whatever choice you made, there's still things that are going to happen with or without you. Like you are not in charge of everything. Like there's a chain of events that happen whether you're there or not there, so it's about that, because Peter, I think his sense of responsibility is like he puts everything on himself. He really wants, like, to be the person that changes things, but in doing one thing he misses another, or in doing this thing he misses this. So I think that's the juxtaposition between the two, identities, Spider-Man and Peter Parker, and that's what we're kind of honing in on in this story.
So you have like the core sort of principles of the character in this movie, but also I suppose perhaps you're making it grounded in the sense that it reflects your own life.
Yeah, and that's something like not a lot of people know or will pick up on. It's just something for me, because like I think that's how I look at film or filmmaking. It's like my own diary. These things that I want to say to people, but I haven't brought myself personally to say to their face. Like I'm kind of hiding behind a screen, like um in the best way I can. Film is like my verbal apology. It's my way of communicating my feelings. And maybe that's not the best the best thing, but it's what I'm working on. And I think people that watch it, the people closer to me, it'll like mean more than, I still think it will be amazing for, people that aren't close to me, but there's going to be a different meaning to it for people that will see me as this character in a different way.
So it's personal to you, but because Spider-Man is often seen as a sort of a universally relatable character in that he represents the everyday person, I can probably assume that with every hour it will be the same. We'll be able to still see some of ourselves in the character as well.
Oh yeah, I think that's the point. Because I think me putting my own, personal or, experiences into the character isn't a reflection of who I am. It is like a reflection of who Peter Parker is. The fact that I can inject my own personal feelings or experiences into this character and it still feel like the character, I think is why he works so well. Like even your experiences, you can relate to Peter Parker. So even if you write something and you write it from the viewpoint of Peter Parker, but it's something you've gone through, it will still feel like a Peter Parker story, because that's who he is. He is us. So I think it's such an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, I think the themes and struggles that Peter goes through in this movie is universal. I think we all have a sense of wanting to do the right thing and not knowing what the right thing is. We try to be the best version of ourselves we can be, and sometimes we still let people down regardless. and that's something that I think everybody goes through. So yes, I believe it. That aspect of the character will shine through.
Mhm. Yeah, because I suppose, you know, like having a character that's one-dimensional never does good for anyone. So, and
No.
the fact that he's also flawed as well kind of represents how pretty much everyone is, in that we're all quite grey.
Agree.
Mhm. So, are there any particular storylines from the comics or any of the films that have perhaps influenced the production at all?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's always influence from, these stories, because you just want to, at the same time as like making your own story, there are things that the films and the comics have done just so right that there's no other way to do it for this character.
Mhm.
I think, surprisingly enough, I think TASM 2 is a huge inspiration um, for the theme of time, because it's called Every Hour, and there's a sense of like urgency to the entire thing that I think the audience will feel. Like this whole thing is kind of like a heartbeat. It's a ticking clock.
Mhm.
um it's like a race against time and like all that good stuff. And I think TASM 2, opens with a clock and ends in a clock tower, or ends up in a clock tower. So I think it has a very good like theme of time and um like running out of it. And it's something that I find interesting because Peter cannot stop it with a fist. Like it's not a physical thing that to stop, it's always happening to him. um and we all wish we had more, whether it be with a loved one or a friend or in a job or an experience. That's something that's always getting away from us that we want to hold dear. And then another one would be, I think I really like, and this is, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion or not, but the Kirsten Dunst, Tobey Maguire like relationship through the films, I know it has its ups and downs, and some people don't love certain aspects and other people's do, but other people, as a people's, blah. But I think there are things that I pull from that aspect of the relationship between those two characters that is in here, and hopefully it's the good bits. But
Mhm.
yeah, so Spider-Man 3 specifically, there's a scene in here that will mirror a scene in Spider-Man 3. And then, for VFX, like Spider-Man action stuff, our VFX guys, Nero and Gale, they're gonna do things that look like TASM 2 swinging. There's a scene that'll look like Spider-Man 1 swinging. So I think there's a bit of everything kind of, mixed in here. And then when you introduce the comic books, obviously Gwen Stacy in the movies is not super different than her comic counterpart, but she exists in a very different decade in the TASM movies than what we're going for and where she was in the original comic books. And I think going back to those and finding out who Gwen Stacy was at that point in time, and her fiery personality, because like, I don't know, when people think of MJ and Gwen, they think of two vastly different characters, but I think MJ, the party girl, is a persona she puts on to like, mask pain, whereas Gwen is like in your face. She straight up tells you when she's not having a good time. And it's and that's such like a lovely aspect of the character. It gives her so much personality. And she's very straightforward. There's even like panels where she's like calling out MJ, and it's like, oh my gosh, and she'll call out Flash, and she'll call out Peter. So she has this very like sparky, she has this like very fiery personality and this flair that I think we're gonna try to bring to this version of the character as well.
Mhm. I think that's interesting. You've got various different influences. Like, I didn't think that way about the clock tower scene in
Oh
TASM
yeah.
2. I know the movie in general is usually panned by everyone, but yeah, I think made it maybe interpret it differently this
Mhm.
time. I think that's interesting because, yeah, like time is a device that is great to use in narrative. And when it's
Oh, yeah.
done really well, it can really make a movie or it could break it. And
Yeah.
I'm also actually, I'm a defender of Toby Garde portrayal of the characters. I've always hated that people criticize them.
Yeah. I
I
don't know.
think,
I watch it and I see, I think there's relatable aspects to their relationship, but I do understand some of the criticism. You
mhm,
know, I think people are, because it's more so on Kirsten Dunst's side of things where I hear criticisms.
mhm,
But I do think um, she is a character that is a product of the time. I think the early 2000s was, women were portrayed a very specific way, how
mhm,
she being a damsel in distress at the end of every movie. Whereas like Gwen and Tasm movies were like, she was integral to the plot. Like she was feet on the ground in both films. Like, she's in Oscorp with the lizard. Um, and then she helps Peter defeat Electro in TASM 2. So she's like very hands-on, whereas opposed to like MJ is like always like in trouble, save me. So that those types of criticisms I get. But I think people should realize, because I feel like a lot of people take Peter's side in those movies when he's kind of, he's not the greatest
mhm.
guy at sometimes to her. um so I think it's very interesting to see, like, she's also like struggling. She loves this guy and she's also like, questioning, like, but this is, I'm getting, that's a rant for another time, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we could probably go on and on about. But yeah, it's not often that I hear some sort of appreciation for the how the characters are portrayed in the trilogy. So I think that's interesting that you're sort of paying homage to that in some ways every hour as well. And yeah, I think as well for Gwen specifically, like I've often heard that like as a character, she's only interesting because she's dead and like yeah, I think because we haven't really had much of Gwen in live action anyway, I think she deserves to be shown
Oh yeah.
like as she really is.
Because that's the thing, I think people would really like her character, and I think Emma Stone did a phenomenal job with those films. I think she did revitalize sort of an interest in this character,
Mhm.
but there's still like part of me that wants, like, you know that true version of Gwen to be seen, because I
Mhm.
think a lot of like um young women would look up to her because she's very, whereas MJ is more of a mystery. Gwen puts herself first, and that's not a bad thing. She is honest with herself and everyone around her, and I think that's such a wonderful quality um to have, because there's no games, there's no, back and forth. There's just like, this is how I feel, you need to respect that, and like,
Mhm.
do what you will with that information. And I love that aspect of the character. So I think yeah, I do hope that this will help bring that version of the character to light. But I do eventually, something bigger, maybe in the MCU, that version of the character does show up one day.
Mhm. Yeah, and then I was just thinking as well that because we haven't seen much of the real Gwen, I think a lot of people come to those opinions and it's just a bit more misinformed. I know that I've been there myself because
Yeah.
I've always been a Mary Jane girl, but I've definitely come to appreciate Gwen a lot more.
Love to hear it.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, Nora, your girlfriend, is playing Gwen in every hour. Yeah.
Yes, and she's doing a lovely job. She's been acting longer than me. She's been doing theater for, I think, over a decade at this point, and
Mhm.
you know she's she wants to break into film acting. That's her dream at the moment. So yeah, she's phenomenal. And sometimes, you know, it's I love the chemistry on set between us is a little funny because, you know, behind the scenes she is actually like upset with me for like a costume thing, or I forgot something at home, you know, because as like while directing and then jumping into a scene, it's like I'll piss somebody off and then like go into the scene and, you know, um so I think it's a funny dynamic, but it's very in character, I suppose. But yeah, I love that she's doing a phenomenal job with all of that.
I suppose being able to work alongside her in this as well makes it all the more fun.
Oh yeah, I think it's writing the dialogue, I think, for Peter and Gwen was very fun to do because it's, we're just bickering at each other, you know, like Peter's defending himself and Gwen is letting him know how she feels, and Peter's off in his own world. So it's very fun because it like I said, like it's very reflective of, and this is like, you know, on like, my bad, I'm sorry, but like that's just that I think like a relationship between a man and a woman sometimes involves like they just have a different way of thinking, and that's not an excuse on anybody's part, but like sometimes men's brains just like they don't operate correctly. They're just so focused on one thing that the other things just like don't register. So it's very fun to write because that's how Peter is. He's just a very like focused individual, and you really have to like get his attention for something to click for him. And I think Gwen knows that, and she's often trying her best to like be like, hey, what's going on? So it's been very fun, and yeah, having her as my Gwen Stacy is like, there's no other option for me. So
Yeah, I have to expose myself because I hadn't seen the teaser for this until yesterday, but the sort of short bit of dialogue between the two of you at the beginning, I thought just from that little bit alone, I could feel the chemistry between the two of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I think, well, I've only heard those two lines, but it sounds like you got the right idea.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. A lot. And thank you for watching the
Yeah, no worries. I'm sorry I'm like months late, but yeah. One aspect of the movie that really interested me was the sort of I think we're all good now, so I'll just re-ask the question, I guess. So one aspect of the movie that I find interesting is the setting is the 60s, and as far as I'm aware, I don't think many adaptations have had like the 60s serve as the time period. So I was wondering why you decided on setting it in sort of like the original sort of decade when Spider-Man was first published.
That was a collaborative thing. The guy who brought me on board, his name is Zakori. He's Atlanta based, and he asked me in 2019 if I wanted to do a Spider-Man fan film. And originally we had a teaser that was scrapped because the idea has been changed, I think 2 times before we settled on Every Hour. But originally it was like the 50s, it was like 1958. And then me and him discussed, I was like, Spider-Man was created in the 60s, can we like bump it up a decade? And he agreed to that. So 1967 is like what stuck. And I think I'm partially influenced by like the books I was reading at the time. I was reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, and I think in 2020 we had a very reflective year of what was going on in the 60s with the protests and, you know, the presidential campaigns and all that stuff. It was a very just heightened year that was very reflective of the issues that they were dealing with the Vietnam War and, you know, all that stuff in the 60s. So it was very inspirational. Not to say 2020 was like, oh my gosh, all this bad stuff is happening, I'm inspired. But I think like just the reflection of those events like reoccurring and us, you know, still dealing with the same problems they were dealing with in the 60s is very interesting, because like we're a lot closer to that than we think. You know, we're a lot more connected to those people than, you know, a lot of people would assume. So I think that that made it a little bit easier to get into the headspace of what were people my age in the 1960s going through. I had a whole year, maybe the past 2 years even, or, you know, 4, but to kind of like live in that, like that time where things were very similar. But yeah, the 60s has been a very, very tricky but very rewarding thing to tackle. I think tricky meaning I can't go outside and I live in New York City because you know, we have 2010 cars outside, 2020 cars, and you know, buildings look different and things have changed in this since the 60s. So I have to be very careful where we shoot and where we film and what people in the background are wearing and, you know, things of that nature. So it has its aspects of difficulty because I'm not like a film studio. I can't close down a block and like make it look like the 60s. But I think there's a very, very good learning experience for me here, especially because I want to do this for a living, like filmmaking is a passion. Just understanding like I'm doing this with almost no budget. Like imagine what I could do with a bigger budget, or, you know, stuff like that. So I'm tackling time period and I'm trying to get vintage cars, and me and Nora have like, you know, bought vintage clothes, or, you know, bought vintage bags, or decorated our rooms to look, you know, like it was time period. So we've purchased things and we've, you know, done our own set design, costume design, makeup, hair. You know, we've looked at different hairstyles for Gwen, and different headbands, different boots, and, you know, what was in. And so the fashion is interesting, and the I think romance feels very heightened at the 60s because thanks to the films that were like coming out at the time. I think it's a very romantic era. I think it's like, it feels like a decade of love. So that right there also enhances the story, you know. So it's has yeah, I'm sorry, it's had its challenges, but I think it's been a very rewarding experience altogether. So yeah.
So there's this sort of acknowledgement of the importance of the decade and its significance that will be reflected on the movie. And
to a degree, yes.
okay. And the sort of trying to achieve the zeitgeist of that decade is yes, it's a challenge to try and replicate an entirely different era. But I think it sounds like it's a testament to how much all of you are dedicated to really make this film alive. That's respectful.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's what matters, is that you know, people watch it and they appreciate the level of hard work that everybody on board has put in. Even the artists, you know, that I've asked to do posters, like they've told me, be like, they're like, this isn't really my style, would you really want me to make a poster? And I was like, yeah, I want to see, like, give it your best shot. So like even the artists are like challenging the way they do art to give it a vintage feel, you know. And then our composer is, you know, incorporating sounds from the 60s as well. So it's a very like, everybody's kind of in on bringing this thing together, and I'm very appreciative of the team and the creators we have.
Mhm. So everyone is sort of maybe stepping out of your comfort zones, but it's also a good way to find your footing in different areas and different styles. Because I guess, directors anyway, I noticed that a lot of them obviously have their own style, but when they try and do things differently while still keeping, some sort of signature to it. So I think it sounds like everyone's working very hard, and I'm sure like it will show in the movie.
Thank you.
So regarding like, I suppose productions such as this, I know for me, I have a lot of ideas in my head about different movies, different series, and I recently started writing a screenplay. But I often fall into sort of the mindset that actually I think this is too ambitious for me. Like, should I bother? So
Okay.
I'm wondering if you had any advice to give like up and coming filmmakers or just anyone who wants to enter the film industry
Yeah.
regarding that sort of
And my advice isn't golden. I think everybody should, find what works for them. But I think from what I've learned, because I'm by any means famous for this or anything, but what I usually try to tell people is that if they have a story that they want to tell, and they feel it's too ambitious, that doesn't mean you have to scrap it. It just means now is not the time for you to make it. I think there's incredible stories. I was having a conversation with the composer and a few of my friends the other day about, how long this industry takes to kind of break into. We were talking about Christopher Nolan and how he was, working his butt off for almost 20 years to get to where he is today. Like, he was working in this industry before we were born, and we know him today as the director he is, but he was not that 2 decades ago, or 3 even. So it's just it's a grueling industry, but if you have the passion and you have the desire, like, it does happen for you, because it's an industry based on hard work. Like, you have to put in the time. There's no shortcuts really, and there's not a secret to success. You just have to be a very hard worker and passionate about what you do. But back to the idea thing, I try to tell people that if you feel it's too ambitious at its current state, find a version that you can do, which means look at what you have and start cutting things out, trying to get to the core of the message. Like, find, when you started this thing, what was it that you wanted to say? And then you trim around it and find that's what you want to say. And then maybe do a 2 to 4 scene shorter version of it, just to see things, fall into place, to see if your story works. And that doesn't mean scrap the ambitious version, but like you're kind of getting more intimate with the story you wrote by like finding its true reasoning. So I did a short film for school called Octagon, which was the first thing I had the pleasure of working with my friends and my friends on. And that originally was an idea I had about 2 years ago that was supposed to be like this full length thing. It ended up being 7 minutes minus credits. So I didn't sit there and, try to figure out how to make, the full thing. I was like, you know what? I have 6 weeks to turn in a project. How can I put this out now? And I trimmed it down to 7 minutes, and that's what I released, but there's still a full version that I want to do that is dear to my heart. So it's just about always working on something. I think it would be my advice. No matter how big or small, there's always something to learn from an experience, like sometimes my friend Andres, or where he was in film school a few months ago, and I would go over, and I've been an actor in one of his productions, and then the next time I was doing sound, and then the next time I was holding the camera, and then the next time I was, just kind of a set of hands on set. So it's like, I'm not complaining that he needs me for different things every time. I'm eager because like I learned how to do sound. I learned how to, use a camera better. I learned how to so there's different things that I learned from each experience. So don't limit yourself to one thing. I think it's such a broad industry, and there's multiple places that you fit and can fit. You just have to have the right attitude about it. Because I was talking to somebody else too. It's like I don't want to work with somebody who doesn't seem like they don't want to be there. I understand like it's a job that requires a lot of attention and a lot of hours. Shooting can take, I've heard of like 18-hour days, which is like insane. But I don't want to work with people that don't necessarily like want to be like, that's what you sign up for, like that, like you wanted to do this. So it's just about having a positive attitude and knowing that like no matter what position you're in, you are growing and you are taking a step towards your own dream. So yes.
So yeah, it's obviously a very long, tiring process, but it's a matter of developing, I suppose, a healthier approach to that. And being passionate about it, obviously, because yeah, if you don't want to be there, then that's all will end up being reflected.
And like the sad thing is you will run into those people. I think they exist in every industry, in every work setting. There's people that are just kind of there to get the benefits, and but there is work that has to be done, sometimes like it's ridiculous, and sometimes like you can like complain about it, but at the end of the day you are getting something so valuable, and if you wake up and then you go do this 18-hour shoot day, and then you go to bed at night, you just got 18 hours of experience. It's not not all of it may have been pleasant, but when you woke up and went to bed, you grew within that time frame. And I think that's what matters, and that should be the focus of a filmmaker, or a screenwriter or a composer. Like even your failures are experiences and learning experiences. So it's about finding what's right for you and what works for the story.
Yeah, I think because what Gavin said when I interviewed him was about, because I mentioned my screenplay writing to him, and he told me that even if nothing ever comes out of it per se, at least you're learning how to write a screenplay. Like each sort of thing that you do as a creative person, it's always valuable.
Exactly. Because I think like there's so many lessons in there too, and I just like getting on learning about other people's experience in the industry, because it's sometimes some people will look at it and be like, it took them 20 years to get that job, and then other people will look at it and be like, wow, they got that job. It's all about perspective. Because we were talking about the other day in that conversation with the composer, we were talking about John Williams, and how he wrote some of the most iconic music in film history. Star Wars and Jaws, like it's such a universal thing. Like everybody kind of knows those tunes, but like he started out like as just one of the musicians and this ensemble of musicians. Like he was just one of many. Like he was just old Johnny Williams. Like he wasn't, you know, and that's a story my composer Will told me. But it's just like I hear stories like that, and like others will look at it and be like, wow, he was in his 50s when he got his first gig or something like that, you know. And then others will be like, holy crap, he did Jaws, he did Star Wars. So it's just like, it's all about like perspective. And then he did, you know, Superman and all that. So he's still doing music. I think he's coming back to do the Kenobi show, which is just amazing. That's but like, yeah, it's years and decades and all that good stuff, but it's about perspective, like knowing that one day it will happen for you. It's not a matter of will it or will it not. It will, if you are doing everything you need to be doing.
I think this is probably where that classic saying, patience is a virtue, really comes in, because I know, like, even in our general lives, there's so many things that we hope happen, but it either doesn't at all or it takes years before we get to that point. And I can definitely attest to that.
Gosh, well, you're doing a phenomenal job. And I think
Thank you.
you will get there. Amazing.
Yeah. And this is also something I often tell my friends as well, is that it's never too late to do anything, because there's this sort of societal norm that we need to achieve certain things, like tick boxes by certain ages, and it's just not how life works out for everyone.
No, because it happens differently for all of us. I think that's something that, like, you know, is missed most of the time, because we're so similar and yet we're so all very different. And it doesn't happen the same way for anybody. So I think that's a very good, you know, view to have. And yeah, I sometimes rag on myself for starting, you know, college so late. I'm 24 right now, and I started college last semester. You know, and then other people from high school that I graduated with, they're done. They're in their jobs, like they're in their field that they're going to be in for the next 20 years. You know, but then it's like I was discovering myself after high school. Like I wouldn't have gone to film school out of high school. I didn't know that's what I wanted to do. I don't know where I would have been, what I would have been studying, but you know, today, here and now, last year when I decided to go, I knew what I wanted to go for. And I think that's, you know, some people can say I started late, or, you know, I made a mistake, or, you know, but that's what's working for me. And I'm very content with the place I'm in now. And I think that's what matters most, is if you yourself feel happy and content with where you are, that's all that matters. You know, it doesn't matter the experience or how many awards or checks in the box you do have. If you are personally happy with where you're at, that's where you need to be.
That's definitely something a lot of my friends need to hear as well, because I do have a few friends who have started college quite late into their 20s, and also a really close friend of mine who had taken a break and then decided to go back last year. And sometimes I feel quite sad whenever anyone mentions anything about, you know, like, if am I doing all this too late? Like, shouldn't I be doing this and this by now? But like, that doesn't matter. Like, everyone goes through life at their own pace. And it definitely applies with those of us who are creative as well.
I agree.
I think the John Williams story is interesting, actually, because I have read up on what certain actors and directors were doing before they became big household names. Like, I think, was it James Cameron was a bus driver before he became a director? And some actors didn't get their big break until well into their 30s or 40s. So, like, you know, it's not like we're not anomalies if we take the time, because time is important. And in that time, so much can be learned. So much can be experienced.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like we went into a bit of a general conversation there, but
On the same wavelength, right there.
but yeah, so I'm really excited to see more of Every Hour. And should we be expecting anything soon about the movie?
I'm trying. I'm doing my best. Right after this, I'm meeting with the VFX guys and talking the script I sent out last night. I asked for feedback, and we're gonna talk feedback, and so that's where we're at. We're still ironing out the wrinkles of the entire thing, and the world's just been so unpredictable. So I hate saying something and things happen. But that's I think very soon, like we want to wrap it up this year. Like this year, this is the main focus of the group, of the cast, the crew, is to wrap this up and to put it out there for everybody to see. It's just there's a lot of pieces that need to be put in place. But yeah, I think what I want to do is, there's obviously posters on the way. I'm not sure if I'll do an actual trailer before the film, because the film is it's probably around 15-20 minutes. And, I don't want to release too much before people get to experience it. But there will probably be like another trailer just right before the movie releases. But yeah, things are going well for the fundraising campaign. Everybody's working hard in their individual, positions. So yeah, should be coming up pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if there's things that you still need to work on, it's us as the audience should always be understandable that it can take longer than we might think. But it sounds like you're all doing a great job, though. So.
Well, thank you, Ashika. That means a lot.
No worries. And this is a bit of a general last question, and I like asking people this, but do you have any favorite films that have, I guess, influenced you to get into filmmaking? Or like, why do you like them?
I think this is a very interesting story. It's always been, I think it's always a part of most people's lives. You see movies, you see TV shows, you're always surrounded by entertainment. So I don't know if there's a specific one that like sparked an interest. I just think I've always had a desire to tell stories and a need to express myself through any form of art, whether it be skateboarding or through songs I share. I think I'm very connected to art in general. And I think film is such a very interesting medium, because it's just over 100 years old. It's so new. Like painting has been around for centuries, and images have been around for forever, but film is such a new concept, and it's growing rapidly. Like just 20 years ago, the technology is like vastly different. So it's such a it's it's a monolith. It's a giant of an industry, and you can so easily get sucked into the wave that's crashing on the beach. But it's just such a interesting window into somebody's soul. It's so beautiful. And I think like moving images mixed with sound, mixed with music, and like I love films that incorporate like artwork itself, or are in service to a story, or shining a spotlight on other artists, or paying homage. So it's just a very cool, interesting, fun type of thing. And I think I've been making little videos for as long as I can remember. Me and my brother this will hopefully never get out there, but we made YouTube videos when we were in like middle school. And then after middle school and high school, I started, making skateboarding videos with my friends. So I was always like, had a camera in hand, going home, putting footage on a computer and editing it to music, and uploading it to YouTube. And then I started making montage videos of Nora or my friend group, and like these little stories, and like kind of showing people our lives and our love for one another. So it's a very interesting thing that I've sort of always had with me and didn't realize until recently that it's like that's what you should be doing. Feels like a no-brainer to other people, but it took me like 22 years, 23 years to realize like that's what I should be doing. But yeah, it's just such a very, very personal. Some of my favorite films are love stories. Blue Valentine, Her, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I love Spider-Man 2 and Man of Steel. Um, Black Swan is another one. Alita Battle Angel, which has another interesting like long journey story behind it. James Cameron wrote the script in the 90s and it got made like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So, um, so it's just an interesting industry, but I think it does so much good for the world. I think everybody, like, it's nice to know that most people have a favorite film. Like, like it's like a favorite color. It's just so integral to who we are as people. And it's such an interesting look into timelines, time periods, like what were the thought process of the people in the 30s. You can go back to the films that were made and that's history right there. You can go back to the 90s and you're like, that, wow, that's what it was like. It's just like everything is captured for future generations to go back and like learn as much as they can. So it's history and it's the future. It's just such an interesting and lovely concept. And I think it will go on for many, many generations. I don't think it's dying out at any point. I think people love being entertained and they love seeing themselves in characters. I think that's why some of these movies, mean so much to people, is because that's their story reflected from these characters. So it's integral to who we are as people, and I want to incorporate my own work into the narrative of film.
Yeah, I'm really happy you mentioned that because for a while now, I've always said to myself and to like other people, or in my film reviews anyway, and that cinema is basically another art form within whatever the umbrella term of art is. And like any medium, I know for me, like I've loved film since I was really young, thanks to my dad. And now every time I watch a movie, it's like I'm not just watching it for the sake of it. I'm able to feel the movie as if I'm living through it as well. And that to me is what makes cinema. I know like obviously people can watch whatever they want. There should be no elitism in terms of that, but yeah, I think everything you said there like was perfectly encapsulated.
Well, thank you. And I agree with that statement. And I think it's such an interesting, I keep saying interesting. I need to find a new word today. Sorry, my brain's still booting up.
No worries, me too.
It's really cool that I could sit in a room of many other people and we all take something different away from the same thing. That's such a unique experience that you can't really find in most art form. You see a picture of a rabbit, most people will come away and be like, that's a picture of a rabbit. With a film about rabbits, you could throw anything in there and then an audience can walk away and have different opinions and take different things away. So it's just I agree with that, but like you said, not everybody has to agree with your opinion on it, but that's how you experience movies, and it's so individual. It's like yeah, remarkable, amazing.
Yeah, so like whenever I watch movies, I always love picking out colors. I love trying to interpret the ways certain shots have been used. And I know like recently I started to watch more silent films just because I haven't really had a lot of experience with the sort of beginnings of cinema. But I watched Sherlock Jr. recently, and I was just sort of mind blown at how the stunts were done at that time.
Yeah.
So like there's always like something that I like to pick out whenever I'm watching, and just makes me think. I like it when cinema makes me think, I guess.
Oh, agree. That's a very good point. I love it.
Yeah, enough about me. Yeah, so I've loved having this conversation, this discussion. And thank you again for being here, talking about the movie and everything else.
Of course.
And I don't know if you have any parting words you'd like to say.
Just thank you so much, Ashika, for inviting me here. You know, and I hope you accomplish everything that you want to in life. You're remarkable. Thank you so much for having me. A great interviewer.
Oh,
And
thank you.
so much for being a fan of Every Hour, and what we're making. So yeah, so thank you to everybody that watches this as well for clicking on a video of me, the lovely Ashika. But yeah, so yeah, thank you very much for having me, and I'm so happy to release this movie to the world.
Great. And thank you for your kind words. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for being here, and thank you to anyone watching on YouTube for sticking around if you made it this far. And yeah, do go check out Jeremy. I'll link everything in the description. Go support Every Hour, and go support everyone else in this community who are making incredible things. And should hopefully see you all next time. Hopefully get to speak to someone else.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Or I'll be back. I have more to say.
Could do a part 2. Cool. Right, my best wishes to you, the cast, crew, and for the rest of the movie. And yeah, probably wrap it up there because I'll keep talking.
All right, thank you so much.
Hey, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.